Way back in the Ozark Mountains, nestled in a hollow deep within the woods, there's a little old house. In that house there lived an ugly, scrawny old woman with a hooked nose and crossed eyes. She had a reputation being the best conjuring woman in the area. Her house was full of herbs and roots and bottles filled with conjuring medicine. The walls were lined with strange books brimming with magical spells. She had only one friend, a mean, tough, old razorback hog that ran wild around her place. The hog rooted through her garbage and ate all her roots, potions, and leftover spells. Some folks say it ate so much that it could walk upright and talk just like a man. That's what some folks say. One fellow claimed he'd seen a pig sitting in a rocker and old Betty's porch chattering away to her while she stewed up some potions in the kitchen. But everyone discounted that story on account of the fellow who told it was a little too fond of the moonshine. You know what I mean? Rawhead was the name of old Betty's gave the razorback, referring maybe to the way the ugly creature looked. A bit like some of the dead pigs come butchering time, down in a hog-scaled hollow. The razorback didn't mind a funny name. Rawhead kept following old Betty around her little cabin and rooting up the kitchen leftovers. He'd even walk to town with her when she came to the local merchant to sell her home remedies. Well, folks in town got so used to seeing Rawhead and old Betty around the town that it looked mighty strange one day around hog driving time when old Betty came to the merchant without him. "Where's Rawhead?" the owner asked as he accepted her basket full of home remedy potions. The liquid in a bottle swished in agitated manner as old Betty did. "I ain't seen him around today. I'm might worried." "You seen him here in town?" "Nobody seen him around today. They would have told me if they did," the merchant owner said. "We'll keep a lookout for her." "That's mighty kind of you. If you see him, tell him to come home straight away," old Betty said. The merchant owner nodded in agreement, and he handed over the weekly pay. Old Betty fussed to herself all the way home. It wasn't like Rawhead to disappear, especially not the day they went to town. The man at the merchant always saved the best scraps for the mean old razorback, and Rawhead never missed a visit. When the old conjuring woman got home, she mixed up a potion and poured it into a flat plate. "Where's that old hog got to?" she asked the liquid. It clouded over and then a series of pictures formed. First, old Betty saw the good-for-nothing hunter that lived on the next ridge sneaking around the forest, rounding up razorback hogs that didn't belong to him. One of the hogs was Rawhead. Then she saw him taking the hogs down to Hog-Scaled Hollow, where folks from the next town were slaughtering their razorbacks. Then she saw her hog, Rawhead, slaughtered with the rest of the pigs and hung up for gutting. The final picture in the liquid was a pile of bloody bones that had once been her hog, and his scrapped clean head lying with the other hogs in a pile. Old Betty was infuriated by the death of her only friend. It was murder to her, plain and simple. Everyone in 3 counties knew that Rawhead was her friend, and the lazy hog-stealing, good-for-nothing hunter on the ridge was going to pay for slaughtering him. Now, old Betty tried to practice white conjuring most of the time, but she knew the dark secrets too. She pulled out an old secret book her granny given her and turned it the very last page. She lit several candles and put them around a plate containing the liquid picture of Rawhead and his bloody bones. Then she began to chant, "Rawhead and bloody bones, Rawhead and bloody bones." The light from the window disappeared as if the sun had been snuffed out like a candle. Dark clouds bellowed into the clearing where old Betty's cabin stood, and the howl of dark spirits could be heard in a wind that pummeled the treetops. Rawhead and bloody bones! Rawhead and bloody bones! Betty continued to chant until a bolt of silver lightning left the plate and streaked out through the window, heading in the direction of Hogscaled Hollow. When the silver light struck Rawhead's severed head, which was piled on the hunter's wagon with the other hogheads, it tumbled to the ground and rolled until it was touching the bloody bones that had once inhabited its body. As the hunter's wagon rumbled away towards a ridge where he lived, the enchanted Rawhead called out, "Bloody bones, get up and dance!" Immediately, the bloody bones reassembled themselves into the skeleton of a razorback hog, walking upright, as Rawhead had often done when he was alone with old Betty. The head hopped on top of his skeleton, and Rawhead went searching through the woods for weapons to use against the hunter. He burrowed the sharp teeth of a dying panther, the claws of a long-dead bear, and the tail from a rotting raccoon, and put them over his skinned head and bloody bones. Then Rawhead headed up to the track towards the ridge, looking for the hunter who had slaughtered him. Rawhead slipped past the thief on the road and slid into the barn, where the hunter kept his horse and wagon. Rawhead climbed up into the loft and waited for the hunter to come home. It was dusk when the hunter drove into the barn and unhitched his horse. The horse snorted in fear, sensing the presence of Rawhead in the loft. Wondering what was disturbing his usually calm horse, the hunter looked around and saw a large pair of eyes staring down at him from the darkness in the loft. The hunter frowned, thinking it was one of the local kids fooling around in his barn. "Lando Goshen, what have you got those big eyes for?" he snapped, thinking the kids were trying to scare him with some crazy mask. "To see your grave," Rawhead rumbled very softly. The hunter snorted irritably and put his horse into the stall. "Very funny," the hunter said. When he came out of the stall, he saw Rawhead had crept forward a bit further. Now his luminous yellow eyes and his bare claws could clearly be seen. "Lando Goshen, what have you got in those big claws for?" he snapped. "You look ridiculous." "To dig your grave," Rawhead intoned softly, his voice a deep rumbling that raised the hairs on the back of the hunter's neck. He stirred uneasily, not sure how the crazy kid in his loft could have made such a scary sound, if it really was a crazy kid. Feeling a little spooked, he hurried to the door and let himself out of the barn. Rawhead slipped out the loft and climbed down the side of the barn behind him with a gnarly to reveal his presence. Rawhead raced through the trees and up the path to a large moonlight rock. He hid in the shadow of his huge stone so that the only things showing were his gleaming yellow eyes, his bare claws, and a raccoon tail. When the hunter came level with the rock on the side of the path, he gave a startled yelp, staring at Rawhead and gasped. "You nearly knocked the heart right out of me, you crazy kid. Lando Goshen, what have you got that crazy tail for?" "To sweep your grave," Rawhead boomed, his enchanted voice echoing through the woods, getting louder and louder with each echo. The hunter took his heels and ran for his cabin. He raced past the old well house, past the woodpile, over the rotting fence and into his yard, but Rawhead was faster. When the hunter reached his porch, Rawhead leapt from the shadows and loomed above him. The hunter stared in terror up at Rawhead's gleaming yellow eyes and an ugly razorback hog's head, his bloody bone skeleton and its long bare claws, sweeping raccoon tail and its gleaming sharp panther teeth. "And what have you got those big teeth for?" he gasped, desperately stumbling backwards from a terrible figure before him. "To eat you up like you wanted to eat me!" Rawhead roared, descending upon the good-for-nothing hunter. The murdering thief gave one long scream in the moonlight. Then there was silence and a sound of crunching. Nothing more was ever seen or heard of the lazy hunter who lived on a ridge. His horse also disappeared that night, but sometimes folks would see Rawhead roaming through the forest in the company of his friend old Betty, and once a month on the night of the full moon, Rawhead would ride the hunter's horse through town, wearing the old man's blue overalls over his bloody bones with the hole cut out for his raccoon tail. In his bloody bear-clawed hands, he carried his raw razorback hog's head, lifting it high against the moon for everyone to see. Thanks for tuning in to today's scary story. If you like these videos, comment below what other kind of scary stories you want to hear. And also don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.